Hi, everybody. This is Chelsea Shade, and I am the Associate Director of Supports for Formative Assessment here at Smarter Balanced. And I'm going to walk you through some of the tips and show you some of the common mistakes I see when people are creating documents. So in order to do this, I will have open a blank Word document, and I will have to be typing some stuff just to show you how to make it. So bear with me as I type questions or titles, etc. So the first thing we're going to cover is headings. And so with any document, I like to always start with a title. I like to use the heading 1, 2, and 3 up here at the top, opposed to title, subtitle. That's just my preference, but whichever one you choose, make sure you never skip a heading level. So for example, don't go from heading 1 to heading 3. You need to go 1, 2, then 3. So for my titles, I always like to center them. That is up to you. For this, I'm actually going to start by mimicking one of the training guides that I created for accessibility strategies. And of course, we always want to use spell check. And for me, I prefer to have all of the font in black just because I know that it is accessible without having to do the color contrast checker. Now I'm going to put in our authors, which are Trisha Klein and Vitaly Sheehan from Smarter Balanced. And notice that their names are not using one of the heading features. It's normal text. And if you've noticed going throughout this training, for our training guides, I like to do key vocabulary. Part of that is my ELL background. Explicit vocabulary instruction is always important. And while this isn't necessarily vocabulary instruction, it is calling out a vocabulary. So because this is our first kind of topic under our title, we're going to use heading 2. So we're going to go heading 2, and we are going to call it key vocabulary. From here, I'm going to list out the key vocabulary, and as was stated in the training, you're going to use the list features in Word, which is up here at the top, and you're going to use numbers if the order is of importance, and then bullets if the order does not matter. So for me, for key vocabulary, the order does not matter. And then after that, we have our guiding questions. So this is also a heading 2. It does not fall under key vocabulary. It's its own section. However, before I move on, I like to do my vocabulary into columns. A lot of people put these into tables, but we want to be very careful when we're using tables because they are hard for screen readers. So what I'm going to do is select them, go up here to layout at the top, and then go to columns. I like 3 columns. I think it just takes up the most landscape. And there we have it. All right, for our questions, for me, I think the order of questions is important because how you answer question number 1 could affect how you answer number 2. Sometimes the order may not be important, so then you would use our bullets. So our first question is, what is the accessibility paradigm shift? Now, for teachers, we really like to scaffold writing instruction for students, and so we usually have lines for our students to respond on. Lines are actually a very tricky thing for accessibility purposes because if we use underscores, the screen reader will read that as underscore, 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 so it's just kind of annoying. If we use like table features, it's not a table, and therefore that is also confusing. If you put in just a bunch of enters like this, then that is a bunch of extra space that the screen reader will read as enter, enter, enter. So if we do want to scaffold and provide writing lines, what we're going to use is this new feature under our grid lines. And if you scroll down, it's called horizontal line. I'm just going to do 3 of those. I think it might take about 3 sentences to respond to this question. And there you have it. The next question is, what is the ISAP tool? I'm going to show you another way that is accessible to insert our lines. So if I put in, let's say 3 spaces, enters, and then I highlight them. If you go to, again, the grid view lines and do insert horizontal border, it will insert the horizontal borders. However, I do think these horizontal lines up here are more clear and you can fix the spacing more easily. So I am actually just going to delete this after showing it to you and just copy and paste these 3 lines. Now it's important to note that when you copy and paste, you'll get the numbered list, so you just go in and delete the numbers. But if your students do not need the lines to respond to, so if they're going to answer everything electronically, then you don't necessarily need the lines to scaffold writing. So I will show you how to do that with question number 3, which is, what are the 3 tiers of strategies? Those are accessibility strategies, but I'm not going to type it just for this training. And so if I just want to provide space for students to respond to, what we're going to do is go to, instead of hitting enter again, this is problematic for screen readers, what we're going to do is go to our layout. So if you come up here to layout, and then if you look at paragraph, you will see a spacing option here. So I click on it, and I always make sure that it says this box right here, don't add space between paragraphs of the same style, is not checked. And then you can play around with it. So notice I am at this line right here, and so if I want a space between this and the question above it, I'm going to do before. And so as I increase this, the space between here increases, and the screen reader won't read these as, multiple enter. And so just play with it until you think that is appropriate. And so again, if you don't think you're going to be printing this out for your kiddos, I would prefer to do this option opposed to this one. All right, the next thing we're going to do is insert a page break. So for these, I always have an answer key, and I like to put them on a different page. So again, instead of hitting enter, enter, enter until it goes on to the next page, what you're going to do is hit breaks, and again, it's under layout, and I'm going to put the answer key on the next page. So to me, the answer key is going to be a heading 1 because it's kind of like a new document. And then just to save some time, I'm going to copy and paste our answer key from the actual guide. And I'm going to make this red. Actually, before I do, I'm going to make everything black. So I hit Control A. I'm just going to make everything black because I don't want the headings to be blue. And then I'm going to make our answer red. So now we have a page break, we have the answer key, and we have some red text. So what we are going to do is check that the color contrast is enough. And I apologize, I am working on a PC, so for those of you on a Mac, it might look a little different. Okay, so to find out what the hex number is for this text, I'm actually going to go right click on it, highlight it, and then right click. I'm going to go to color, and then I'm going to go to more colors. Now here the color is chosen, so if I go to custom, I can see that the red is 255, and then green and blue are 0 and 0. My version of Word does not have the slide that gives you the hex number. So what I have to do is I have to go to the RGB to hex converter and put in my numbers. So my red was 255 and then 0 and 0. And so our hex number is FF120000. Okay, so then we open up our WebAIM color contrast checker. The foreground color is the color of the text in this case, and it was FF and then 4 zeros. And then our background was white, which for that is actually 6 Fs. Okay. So our ratio is 3.99 to 1. And if you look here, for normal text, this actually fails. For our AA compliance standards, it passes if it's large text. And then for a graphical object and user interface, it would pass. So right now, if our text is less than 14 font, it's going to fail. So what you can do is kind of play around with this until it all passes. So now if I use a color that is AD 0000, that red color will actually pass. Again, I'm going to go here and I'm going to convert the other way. So if I put in AD 0000 and convert, then we have red is 173, green is 0, and blue is 0. A lot of work, I know, which is why I always prefer just to use black. So here we're going to go to more colors, go to custom, and we're going to actually type in our color that we know is accessible. There we go. So this red is accessible, and that is how you check color contrast. The next thing we're going to go over is inserting images. I'm actually going to do this on a new page. So again, I'm going to go to Insert, Page Break. So I'm on my next page. I am going to insert an online picture. I'm going to do an apple. If you click here, it says Creative Commons only, so we know copyright is the permissions is okay, and it will actually give us the attribution statement, which is very nice. So resize it according to how you see fit. And what is very key here is that this image has to be in line with the text. So to do that, you can click on these 3 lines right here. You can also get there by right-clicking, and it should pop up. And we want to make sure that it says in line with text. You cannot do any of these other options, so you cannot make it square or tight or go through or behind or in front of your text because screen readers won't be able to see it. Now, if your image is decorative only, then you could do that because screen readers won't be reading the decorative images. The next thing we need to do is add an alt text. So I right-click, go to Edit Alt Text, and then it's up over here. So we want to keep it concise. We don't want to say this is an image of or a screenshot of, etc. So I'm just going to say red apple. Now, if I do want to put in another image that is just decorative, then when you put in your alt text, you're going to click this check mark down here that says mark as decorative. If it will let me select it. There we go. I don't know why that was so difficult. So now the screen reader will not read this to screen reader users because it is a decorative image only and it's not important to understanding the content. Next, I will show you how to put in a table. So it is important that we use the table feature in Word. So if I go to Insert, and then we go to Tables, we're going to put in the dimensions of the table we want to work with. And I'm actually going to add one more row down here. So this is going to be my header row, and this is straight from the training. So we're going to say day of the week, hours exercising, and hours sleeping. And this will actually be the first column that kind of is like a column row, more or less. And so this information in these cells corresponds to Monday, and the information in these cells correspond to Tuesday. Now, it's also recommended that you use the styles, table styles in Word to kind of make it look like these are your headers. And so for me, I think this one is nice and simple. You know, black and white contrast meets the color contrast requirements. And then what is important after we put in our content is we need to identify the header rows. So once you click inside your table, the table tools will pop up at the top and it will say design or layout. Under design, if you look at the left, you'll see header row and first column. So I want to make sure that this header row is checked and that the first column is checked. This will read appropriately to screen readers so that they can understand like what the cells are conveying, so that this is the number of hours exercised on Monday and the hours slept on Monday, etc. Some people we've seen have simply checked this first row as the header row when it was not. So for an example, if you're doing vocabulary cards and you just have like 6, let's say here, you would have 9 cells of just different vocabulary words. So let me just do another example. Okay. So I wanted to do vocabulary cards, and to get the layout, a lot of people have been using tables. And then just to pass accessibility, they go in and they mark this as a header row. This is not a header row. It does not convey information about the cell underneath it or the cell to the right of it. And so screen readers are going to be very confused. What I recommend doing um, if you want to create something like this is to actually create a header row. So add a row above and say vocabulary words, and we're good to go. The other thing that you can do, and actually I do want to say it is okay if you actually merge this top one, because it is applying to the bottom one, the bottom cells below it. Another thing that you can do, and that I highly recommend just to avoid using tables for these types of things, is to insert rectangles and then do text boxes for your words. Another thing that is important is to have table headers. And so for this one, you're going to want to do a header 2. And then type in your header, just so the screen reader can read the header so that the user knows what information is coming to them. Okay, the last thing we're going to go over is hyperlinks. I think most of you are very familiar with hyperlinks, so just a quick overview. So here, I said, please go to the S&E training site. Now it's important to note, I wouldn't want to use please go as the link. You also want to avoid things like click here for the link. You want the naming convention that you use to actually convey what the link is for and the function that it has. So I'm going to select the text and right click and then go to link and then put in the address here. And then hit OK. Notice that this is blue and underlined. All URLs are usually underlined, and that's how screen readers are used to it, and actually sighted users. So we really would like you to reserve underlines for links, and then you can use bold or other means to convey conditional information. Now, if you think your participants are going to print this document off and they need the actual URLs because they can't right click and go open the hyperlink, then you would want to at the end of the document create an appendix that has the list of URLs, and you would still want to have, let me do another page. We're just going to call this our appendix. And so you would still want to have the hyperlinked name with the long URL underneath it. And we actually do not want this URL to be linked. So again, for sighted users, if you think they're going to print them off and they need the URLs, this is the appropriate way to do it. The last step in this process is to run an accessibility check. So to do that, you're going to go up here to review. You're going to click check accessibility, and then over here you'll see your results. So group 9, it says this is missing an alt text, and that is because the copyright license is merged with the image. So there's two things you can do. You can group those. You can copy and paste the attribution underneath it and take it outside of the image, or you can, when you put in alt text here, so if I right click and say add a description, I'm going to say red apple with copyright attribution. And actually by clicking around, you can see that this says red apple with copyright attribution. And if I click just the image, there's nothing there. So I'm going to say red apple here. Okay, and then a warning is the merge or split cells in the table. And that was because we actually put this at the top. Again, this is accessible. It's not recommended unless you know what you're doing. Again, it would be preferred if you put in squares and then text boxes to put in your vocabulary words instead of doing a chart, or do something like I did at the very top of this document. But the warnings are something that could be annoying for screen readers, but it's not necessarily inaccessible. So thank you. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you soon. Have a good day.